Hey, we all.
What's up, Mr. Nate?
What's up, Mr. Brian?
How are you?
You know, living the dream. Oh
Absolutely. Of this journey of being a human.
yeah, isn't it fun?
Yeah, not always, but
That's what we're going to be talking about today. Isn't that funny?
absolutely.
All right,
Well, welcome back, boys and girls.
welcome back. This is episode 10, and as some of you may have seen in the reel I made, we'll be talking about shadow work. So, shadow work is something that's not really highlighted or talked about regularly because in our society and in our upbringing, we're always taught to kind of like, oh, it's bad or it's uncomfortable. I'll just look for outside resources to help it or outside influences or whatever. And we never acknowledge the truth about ourselves or and kind of relates to what we were talking about in the last episode where we were talking about like therapy and stuff when I mentioned I had therapy, but if I never did the inner work, then there would have been no growth. And we're called warriors of light, but you also have to acknowledge, there's a darkness and light to everybody. And if you don't work through it, then you're never going to grow.
Absolutely. Yeah. We like kind of like you and I talked about before, we all have a dark and a light side, however you want to look at that. But um, we're taught a lot of times to suppress and push away that other side of us, because what we've been taught by, whether it's government, mainstream media, whoever, saying this shit's wrong, this shit's bad, and I tell people, well, then you're pushing away a part of who you are, right? And yeah, we always have to do, like you said, that internal work and work on who we are, work on those sides of us that what we want to say, quote unquote, dark side of us. We need to be working on that. We need to be trying to improve that, but also embracing that that's a part of who we are.
Yeah, because actually, what I've been thinking about a lot is, you know who David Goggins is, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So he talks about that actually on a whole nother level because he went through it and he has one of the most powerful minds because he worked on himself and said instead of being a victim, I'm gonna empower myself with all the stuff that he went through in his life and all the trials and tribulations that he went through that he talks about a lot. But he said something that really resonated with me, and he's like, life is suffering, right? But if you can get to the other side of it, like if you work, he's like, a lot of motherfuckers can't sit in a dark room by themselves, right? And you and I have talked about this before. And he's like, but on the other side of that suffering, there's a lot of power in there. There's a lot of energy in there that you can take it and use it to develop yourself. So, like, my example would be like when I got out of the military, I had like 11 years of shit that I just kind of suppressed and pushed down. And like, I didn't realize I guess I was doing it, but it was just kind of automatic. And like I talked about in the last episode, that was with alcohol.
Hmm.
But so for the longest time, I struggled with it. And then one day I was like, what the fuck am I doing? And I wasn't like when in the last episode I was talking about therapy with PTSD and all that stuff. I was like, and I started to get those memories back that I had suppressed, like because especially at least when I was in, it might be different now. I don't know, but if you went to like behavioral health or try to talk to a therapist, it was like frowned upon, or it's like, oh, what's wrong with this guy? He's not fit or whatever, right? So I never did it when I was in, never told anybody about it, never talked to anybody about it. And there's a lot of people who never did that. And I'm sure a bunch of first responders, like my cousin, I have my cousin who is kind of like that, or he's like, oh, it's fucking whatever. But it's
Hmm.
like you can tell, it's like, yo, dude, like talk to somebody or work on yourself. But it's not just military and first responders. It's anybody everybody has that. Everybody has something about themselves that they're like, oh, what's wrong with me? Or like, and they don't deal with it in a healthy way. We just suppress it. Like when I was talking about alcohol, I didn't realize like it wasn't like it was more like a habit. So like I wasn't like, I was aware, like, yeah, I'm drinking beer, but I wasn't aware of why I was doing it. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
would drink because it made me, because basically any substance that you use, if you do too much, right, you're basically trying to fill a void or you're trying to escape your reality. So that's what it was for me. It was like, oh, I'm just numbing myself to all these unwanted thoughts or feelings or whatever. And then I realized one day, I was like, oh shit, like maybe that is why I'm drinking. Or maybe that's why I keep repeating the same lessons over and over again, you know? Like we talked about earlier, like life is a school. I mean, yeah, life is a school or the earth is a school and we're here to learn. And if we don't learn, we're gonna keep repeating those same mistakes until we learn the lesson that we're supposed to learn. Right.
Absolutely.
So um the reason why I wanted to bring up shadow work is because it's something that I have dealt with, I'm sure you have dealt with. And this isn't an episode like, oh, this is a cure all, because like we just said, like working on yourself is a continuous journey. Like you have to, it's hard. It's not fucking easy when you wake up and you gotta deal with your bullshit, your own bullshit on top of everything else you gotta deal with. Because in our society, we're so weighed down by everything, pretty much. So how many people take the time to actually work on themselves? Like David Goggins said, sit in a fucking room in the dark by yourself. Because like it's kind of like it's like basically meditation, right? Because
Absolutely.
when you're fucking when you're if it's quiet and you're alone in a room by yourself and there's nothing sensory, like no lights or anything, what happens? You go inward. And then that's where all that shit starts to come out. Like, oh, my life's fucked up. Oh, I'm doing this, doing that. Because he talked about it with his life, but it resonated because I'm like, this motherfucker's right. You know, like how many people just push all the shit that they're dealing with to the side and numb it with like something else.
Well, most people do, right? I mean, no matter what it is, whether it's food, a substance, sex, whatever, right? Something. I mean, something to, like you said, kind of just numb away the pain and not have to focus on it. But again, like you said, it's sitting in a dark room. It's one of the first things I always ask people when I hold my meditation groups. And as I say, who in here can sit by yourselves in a dark room for like an hour with just you and your thoughts? And most people are like, hell no. And I'm like, see, that's the point. You need to be able to do it. Like you were saying with meditation. I mean, I don't know how many times since I started my meditation practice several years ago where shit comes up, right? Um, my repeated lesson was like I've said before in the podcast, was in relationships because of problems I had when I was younger, that I didn't even realize really affected me that much. I was, subconsciously acting out in relationships, and it was a defense mechanism. It was from old trauma, not wanting to get hurt. So, I would basically sabotage a relationship, not even knowing why I was doing it, you know. Um, and when I got divorced and went through this process, it's obviously still going through it. It brought to light a lot of shit inside of me, and I was like, whoa! Like now I got the lesson of why I was doing what I was doing in relationships, which is great because it sucked going through it and realizing all of it. But now I'm so aware of it that going forward, when I'm in a serious relationship again, I know I'm not going to repeat those things because I've now learned why I was doing what I was doing. Right. But
Yeah.
that took a lot of going within and just self reflection, looking at myself and being like, okay, dude, this is your stuff. You can't look at your ex, you can't look at any of that. You got to look at yourself and say, what was I doing the whole time that was causing the issues? Because yeah, both parties usually have stuff, right? But kind of like you and I were talking about earlier, I learned to just focus on and point at myself and not point at other people and blame other people, right? Because the only person I can truly fix is myself. I can coach and help and assist other people, but at the end of the day, I got to continue to work on me, right? So
Yeah, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink, you know? So
yeah, that's why I always tell people, I'm like, I can help you, I can encourage, I can, coach, I can do all those things. But if you're not willing to do the work, and that's one of those things where I figured out, like, okay, for me to improve this life and for me to learn my lessons and move on, I'm going to have to continuously go inside. So we talk about shadow work. They have the term, the dark night of the soul. And I tell people, typically you have multiple dark nights of the soul, right? Where you're just, it's like you have all this self realization where you're like, holy shit, what have I been doing? But I think the thing with that is what I always tell people is, again, that's part of embracing that, right? Is learning about yourself, learning why you do the things you do that have caused quote unquote issues in your life. And that's a continuous process. Like you said, that's like a never ending, just going inside and learning how can I be a little bit better today than I was yesterday. Right.
Yeah, because when like kind of like what you were just saying, or like actually what we're both saying is, in a way, a lot of people just kind of live on autopilot. You know, we're just like, oh, what time is it? Oh, I got to do this. Okay, and then you get home, and then you're like, okay, what am I gonna do? And we have all these distractions and all this stuff, like what I talked about last episode, like Netflix or fucking video games or freaking, I don't know, alcohol, drugs, fucking, or even the people you surround yourself with,
Yeah.
right? Because like if you're around people who are negative, then you're kind of like a product of your environment if you allow it to affect you. You know what I
If
mean?
if you allow it, like you said, a lot of people say that they're like, you'll become the sum of like the five people you hang out with the most. I tend to agree, but then disagree. Yes, surround yourself with people that are going to lift you up, absolutely. But if you happen to be in an environment where people, like you said, maybe tend to be more negative and more pessimistic, it's a choice to say I'm going to choose happiness and I'm going to choose to be optimistic at all times, right?
Yeah.
So when folks that tend to have a negative, viewpoint on the world or on life, I always tell people, hey, the universe is working for you. You know what I mean? Like God's always on your side. So like even when you are, like we were talking about earlier, when you're going through something, it's literally trying to help you grow. Like here, I'm gonna allow you to go through this shit so you can learn and grow and expand, and then now you'll be able to go help someone else in the future, right? Going through the same thing.
I think it's also about, I mean, I think it's about experience, and through experience you gain perspective, right? Because
Yeah.
like when we met, what we were doing, we were like, this shit's not stressful at all, right? Because you and I agreed, like, dude, we've been through way more stress. Like, this is fucking nothing.
Yeah.
This is like making a cake. I don't know.
It's a walk in the park.
Yeah. Like, uh, but because we went through different things from than most people, we understand life in a different way. And then exactly what you said, you know, you have to, in order to work through it, you have to like we talked about earlier, you have to accept that shit so that you can learn how to navigate it. And then because through working, like, there's that saying, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, right? Because if you just keep doing the same shit day in and day out, you're never going to change, right?
Yep.
So if you don't ever acknowledge that darkness inside of you, how is it ever gonna be brought to light? Like you said, you're just gonna
Absolutely.
keep living in a shadow instead of basically ascending to your true potential, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think that's the thing is like you said, is just, it's embracing it truly. I mean, I think one of the like I told you earlier, one of the biggest times I heard someone say it that really like stuck was when Ram Dass had talked about like how he learned to embrace all of his little intricacies and all his goofy things about him that he used to try to suppress and push away for so long that he's like his saying he said I started to invite them in for tea. He goes because it was more of like, hey, like, okay, this goofy thing about me is coming back up. Well, I'm still gonna love myself through this. I'm just gonna invite you in. Doesn't mean you sit there and continue, maybe behaviors or things that are destructive, but you know that that's a part of you, whatever it is. And the thing is, too, is like I've always said too, is what I've learned is whatever you try to really push away, it's gonna come back with a vengeance. So you pretty much got to stop trying to push stuff away and you got to just deal with it, face it, go forward with it. And that might mean you're going to stumble through it for a little bit, but guess what? Eventually you'll get to the place where you've grown beyond whatever it is, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if you compare what we're talking about, because we're talking about like inner work, meditation, basically in a spiritual sense, but it's like energy too, or like to me, I equate them to be the same, pretty
Yeah.
much. But like it's just like when you're working out, how do you get stronger? Through repetition,
Yep.
right? And then to progress, you have to keep doing more little by little so you don't injure yourself. So you could take that's a good metaphor to take that approach with working on the shit you have inside, because maybe you like we said the last time, like, oh, take just 10 minutes, try 10 minutes of meditation, right? Well, now take 10 minutes and try to see if you can sit in a dark room by yourself with no outside noise, no outside nothing, and just kind of sit with yourself. Because when I feel like it's meditation, but it's also like meditation is a moment also to be able to reflect.
Yeah.
And for me, years ago, well, actually, within the last 2 years, I would do stuff like that, but then immediately, like those negative thoughts would hit. Like those hit the strongest when you first start, in my opinion or in my experience, I should say. But then I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, why do I think like this? Like, because I used to being the way I grew up and just being in the military and stuff, I just developed a certain view of the world, and humans. Like, oh, the world's fucked up. Like, there's no faith in mankind. All we do is kill each other, blah, blah, blah. But then I got out and I was like, oh shit, I'm not a part of that world anymore. So, so it's like now it's helped me gain a different perspective. Like, no, not everyone's as bad as, what the media might say or like what's portrayed to our eyes. And if you like we were talking about earlier, if you learn to be able to actually sit and assess things and think for yourself, to include what's within you, then you can heal yourself too, and
Yeah.
then gain a different perspective in a positive way, hopefully. Because like these people who fucking go and shoot up schools, they never had anyone to sit them down and be like, "Yo, what the fuck's going on with you?" But what do? They might bring them to a therapist. They might put them on medication. Most are. I'm not a professional, but I've read the fucking side effects of most of those medications, and they do more harm than good. You know, uh, and I think that as a society, we stray away from what could truly help people. Is like just having someone like we were talking about, like we were talking about with business, having someone as a mentor. You know, it's important to have a mentor to help guide you through life, and a lot of young people lack a positive mentor to give them information like we're talking about. Because what do they say? Like, or like, for example, when my son gets angry, I used to be like, oh, you shouldn't be angry. And it's like, no, that's not how you handle it. Because you're basically telling your child, like, oh, your emotions aren't valid, right?
Yeah.
But the way to handle it, and we've talked about this, because you're like, because you've said like, I never try to change your kids for who they are. Uh, but now I'm just like, what's wrong, buddy? Like, and just making it a conversation, like a two-way street, instead of being like, just stop it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's that's a good point because I think that's a lot of what's been taught over the years, right? Especially for I can say, well, I'm sure for women as well, but for men, you know what I mean? Hey, just push those feelings down. You don't need to have that. You need to go be tough and go handle business. And I'm like, that's why you have all these people with a bunch of suppressed trauma and anger and hurt, and then that comes out in an explosion of someone going to shoot up a school or do something stupid, right? Because they had, like you said, no one there to sit with and be. That's why I say, you got, like you said, having a mentor, having somebody that you fully trust that can go deep with you, and help you kind of get through those things that you've been pushing down, right? Um, and especially if it's somebody that you feel like more of a spiritual connection with because you feel like, hey, they understand me, they've been through this. That's why I share a lot of times things I've been through or still deal with or whatever the case is, because I know that a lot of times I can connect with people on that level to be like, hey, I still deal with that situation, or I've gone through a lot of healing with that situation, instead of just, I think a lot of people that are in a position of whether they're a coach or a therapist or whatever, it's almost like, a lot of people will try to act like they've just healed everything and they're fine. Like, oh yeah, I'm here to help you. I've healed all myself. No, you haven't. Guaranteed behind the scenes, you still got a bunch of shit going on.
See, it's interesting that you say that, dude, because that, like we talked about last episode, the key component in therapy is they're missing a very important part, and this is going to be controversial. Again, I'm not a medical professional, but when I would do video calls kind of like this with my therapist, and we've talked about this plenty of times. I could fucking see it, bro, because you had mentioned something little, like giving an example from his life, and I'm looking in his eyes, dude, and I'm like, you still got shit you're dealing with, bro. Like,
Absolutely.
and because you and I know, like, you can pick up on that shit, right? Like energy, reading people, like, yeah, there's more to the story than what you're telling me, obviously, right? But
Absolutely.
like, but they ignore, they don't, I don't know if it's like a law because maybe of religious whatever, I don't know, but no one ever talks about energy or spiritual awareness or meditation or fucking, like, instead of saying, oh, this is a behavioral thing. It's like, yeah, maybe, but there's more to it than that, because it's not just about physical or mental. It's like we talked about, it's about energy.
Yeah.
It's about fucking acknowledging that, like, for example, you walk into a room and the air's heavy, you're like, oh shit, something's off in here. Like, we all have that sense, but not everyone, even if someone else acknowledge, like, senses something like that, or like, oh, I got a bad feeling, they don't know what it is, or they don't acknowledge, like, that it's, hey, it's the energy in here is heavy because it's fucking, there's a negative energy in here. Or like, you wake up and you're fucking pissed off, and then your day is just going to shit, like everything's going wrong. It's because your energy is shit, and you're attracting that. What you put out, you bring back to yourself, like we talked about. So it sounds more complex than what it is, but what I'm saying is there's deeper root causes for things than just, oh, I had a shitty experience.
Hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
there's a lot of stories I've heard, uh like in Afghanistan, for example, like paranormal shit, or like, um the concept of something like attaching to you, if you're doing something, or like if you're in an area. Like, people don't think about that. Like, in the horror movies where it's like, oh, I moved houses because it was haunted, and then the same shit's happening in their house.
Yeah.
It's because changing the house isn't going to help it, dude. You
No,
know?
it's something deeper. It's way deeper than just that superficial external thought process,
Yeah.
right? I think again, it's like, that's why they say, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And the thing is like we were talking about earlier, like I tell people, from my understanding, there's spirits around us all the time. We think that only what our eyes can perceive and see is what's going on. And I'm like, no, there's actually a whole lot more going on. And so I truly believe, like, trying to be a light, trying to be a good energy, and not trying in a sense of like a false way, but truly just embodying that, allows you to attract better things and better situations, right? Um, but that's why, like you said, somebody wakes up angry. You have people that wake up and they're just not happy with life, and it seems to them that things just keep going to shit every day. Well, it's because that's what you're embodying every single day.
That's what you're embodying, and then that's what you're projecting.
That's what you're putting out, yeah, to
Like,
the
we've
open.
said it 1,000 times in multiple episodes, I think, but it's important because people don't. No one ever talks about this shit. At
I know.
least, at least in the mainstream, right? It's always like, oh, this guy was blah blah blah. Like, they just talk about fat or facts,
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
know?
It's because it's because we're taught to live just in this 3D matrix, you know what I mean? And that this is all that's going on, but it's all what you perceive, right? It's all what you, like you said, it's what you put out and what you perceive. I mean, I know I've said this before, but it's like I tell people, you can have a car accident and you have five people that saw that car accident happen at the exact same time, and you have five different ways of looking at what happened, right? And so it's really the way you look at life. I mean, that's why I tell people, if you always tell yourself life is actually working for you, because I truly believe it is, then you will see, even in the hardest of times, you can sit back and be like, what am I supposed to be learning from this? Right.
Mhm.
Um, because I do that all the time, like I said, with myself. I mean, I look at things and I'm like, okay, I made this decision. These things happened. Obviously, I do believe we are divinely guided, but we're divinely guided into these situations to learn a lesson and grow, right? And a lot of people just, it's a victim mentality, and I tell people, don't play a victim. Just, hey, you're here, you chose to come here, your soul's here for a reason. Let's see what I can learn. Let's try to make this life, kick ass. But that doesn't mean that it's always going to be just this beautiful, rainbows and butterflies. It's not always going to be that way.
Well, you just made me think. You remember that video I sent you about, like, masculinity?
Hmm.
Did you?
Yep.
I don't know if did you watch it?
Yeah.
So you just made me think of that because I've watched that video like 100 times, maybe, I don't know, but because it resonates, it has a very good point, and at the end of it, it basically, what it's about is the suffering of men, but it's like for a higher purpose, right? Like there's a reason why, everybody in life suffers, men and women, right? We just have maybe different aspects we suffer with for a reason, right? So like in traditional society, like the men work, fucking slave away to fucking provide for the family, and the women, being a mom is not easy. I know that. Being a parent is not easy, but it's different levels of suffering because, dads, whatever, traditionally. Nowadays it's a little different, but it's still pretty similar, I would say. But the point I was getting to is that in it said, we were just talking about, if your day's shitty, blah, 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 or whatever, meditation or prayer is powerful. But like we've talked about before, yet again, just because you pray for something doesn't mean it's going to fix the problem right away, right? Because in the video, I love it because it's like I prayed for strength and God gave me problems to solve, or I prayed for uh, courage and God gave me fears to overcome. It's basically that aspect of it. Like when you pray for something, God's gonna listen, but he's not gonna just fix the problem for you. He's gonna fucking send you on a path to overcome those things. He's gonna confront you with it instead of just making it disappear. Because then, if you just make it disappear, like, okay, I don't have to do any work, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I say it's always meant for growth. And so that's why, that's why they always say, like, when you do pray for things, um, God doesn't work the way we work. You know what I mean? Like, our linear mind that thinks that all the, our prayers are supposed to be answered in, X, Y, and Z. And God's like, yeah, no, I have a whole other thing that you're going to, not so much that you're going to deal with, but that you're going to experience, like you said, so that you can grow. Right. And because again, that's why we're here. We're here to learn and grow. It doesn't mean you're not going to have a ton of beautiful experiences. Absolutely. But when those, quote unquote, harder times come, there's a grander purpose for it. And if you slow down enough, which that's what meditation's helped me do a lot, is slow down enough to look at things and actually evaluate, okay, what is really going on here? As opposed to just being reactive and being like, oh, everything's shitty. No, it's not. It's just literally things that I have to go through right now so I can grow and expand and become a better version of me. Right.
Well, yeah, just like if you're talking about a relationship, for example, like something I learned is that, and what I was doing in, this is a quote I saw the other day, but I know I've done it before. It's like the problem with people sometimes is that they listen to respond instead of listening to understand. You
Yes.
know, if we could all listen to understand, because what basically what that means is, uh, you're allowing your own insecurities and your ego so that you can respond. So you're like, oh, I got to one up on this person I'm arguing with, instead of like, huh, like, oh, they just said this. What does that mean? Or what? How does that affect? Or what have I done to affect that? And that's a part of where shadow work comes in too, because you're also dealing with the ego, the monkey mind, right? Because sometimes our pride gets in the way. Sometimes, we sometimes people argue, for example, just to be right. Some people just want to be right, no matter if they're right or not, you know? And it's like they don't realize, and maybe that's how they were raised, or maybe that's, whatever. Without not I'm not saying raised on purpose like that, but that's maybe the environment they grew up around, so they think that's the right way to do things. And then what happens? Nothing gets fixed. It just gets worse.
Exactly.
You know?
That's why I always tell people, like really evaluate even like your family, right? Like you were raised, by your parents and you observed, things that they say and do and whatever the case is. You don't have to be them. Like start to think for yourself, start to break that cycle, break that chain, like whatever it is. Because you often see people just follow suit. And I'm like, why, when does that feel good to your soul? No? Okay, then question it. You know what I'm saying? Because they're just acting off of what they knew. you know Eventually, like, you got to come along and say, okay, like, why am I here? Like, how do I heal? How do I grow from all these ancestral traumas and all these things, which goes back to shadow work, right? Because these are just stuff that you have probably carried from many lifetimes, and you got to be able to let that stuff come up and out and heal, and
Yeah.
see why you do the things that you do. Why do you make the decisions you make?
Dude, I'm gonna be honest. I fucking when I got out of the military, because this is when it kind of like I had been already practicing like meditation and stuff, but not as frequent as I should have been. Because I started it while I was in. Um, but when I got out, that's when shit started to like. I was finally like in a space where I was like, whoa, okay. It was kind of like like almost like a. I think a clean slate is the wrong term to use, but that's the best one I can think of right now. You know what I mean? It's like you have time to like think about shit.
Yeah.
Finally, after like over a decade, right? So, so I'll be honest. I would have mornings where I would just wake up and fucking cry, or I was like more in touch with my emotions, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like what is going on? Like, why am I emotional right now? You know what I mean? And then I realized, like, oh, maybe because I'm finally dealing with shit I never dealt with before. I just kind of sedated it. Fucking, I used to use exercise and alcohol all the time to fucking just get my mind off of shit,
Hmm.
which is exercise is good, but when you're doing it in combo, it's not a good healthy mix. But uh, but yeah, it took right up until I met you. I had been going through that shit, like that shadow work of, oh, maybe maybe this is okay for me to cry, or maybe like you said, maybe it's okay to cry, maybe it's okay to fucking go through this, because in a way I'm getting it out and learning from it instead of just being like, oh, quit being a pussy, you're crying. You know what I mean?
No, yeah. It's honestly, it's a beautiful thing because what it is, from my understanding, is it's trauma and suppressed things wanting to leave your body. So that's why I
Yeah.
tell pushing it back down because it gets uncomfortable. Let it come up and out. Because believe me, I'm the same way, man. Like I've had many meditations. I've come out of meditation crying, sobbing because I'm things that I didn't realize really affected me. And then in turn, that's the other thing is like, I've always had a heart that wants to help people, serve people, love people, not hurt anybody. But especially in relationships, with my actions would do things that would end up hurting people because I wasn't dealing with that shadow side of me. You know,
Yeah.
I was just ignoring it. So I had no idea why I would do the things I would do. People would ask me, like, why'd you do that? I don't know. Like I was, then I realized now I see it clearly. It was just all defense mechanism because I was afraid of being hurt again. You know what I mean? So it's really going inside and just dealing with that discomfort. They have, I don't know if have you heard of the darkness retreats that they have now?
Is that where they like put you in a dark ass room for like a day?
Well, for like a week, you usually go for like
Oh,
5. I think you can do like, you can do a day. A lot of them will let you leave when you want to leave, but folks that I've seen, like Aubrey Marcus and these different people, they've gone to do it for like a week, and they're saying how much shit actually comes out because you have zero, like you don't have a phone, you don't have any of that stuff. It's just you in the dark, right? And it allows for so much to come out. It's because, like you said earlier, in this go life, we're so distracted with oh, we're supposed to be doing this, we're supposed to be doing that. No, we're not. Like the biggest work, when they say, I always tell people, do the work. Yeah, work out, but doing the work is also meditating, is also going within and letting the inside heal, right? And that's putting in the work. See, but most people are just like, oh yeah, I know, I'm super busy creating this, whatever. Okay, great, create whatever it is you want to do. But if you're never sitting with yourself, that's why you'll see people that have, looked on the worldly senses like, oh man, it looks like they've achieved a lot, but then they're in their house, miserable as can be,
yeah.
depressed. They're not dealing with anything internal.
Well,
Right?
that's another way people do cope with stuff like that is they distract themselves with work.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yep.
oh, I have a problem at home, I'm just gonna be at work.
Yep. I'm just
Or
gonna be.
I have this issue, I'm just gonna work because it takes my mind off of it and I don't gotta think about it. Right.
Yep.
Because my dad always used to say you can never you can he used to say, or he still does say every once in a while, he's like, you can never run away from your problems, or he said, I think he either said that or running away from your problems won't fix anything.
Well, no,
Right.
and that's what we do is we avoid them, right? We try to anyway.
Yeah, until it builds up, because
Until.
what happens with a lot of people, I think, and from what I've experienced, is that if you go long enough, like no matter how much time goes by, like you said, eventually it's going to resurface,
Mhm.
and you're not going to be able to you're not going to necessarily going to know when or how, but if you never deal with shit, it's going to come back up.
Well,
You
and
know?
yeah, in a sense, if you don't deal with it, eventually you'll hit rock bottom. Then you fucking have to deal with it, and that rock bottom could be anything, right? Could be whatever the case is, but um, you will have to face it at some point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's why I tell people. So just start doing the work now. Start going into your meditations now. Start going within yourself. Journal. Read books and listen to podcasts like this. Listen to podcasts that are going to lift you up. They're going to help you think. Right. I mean, like as I've continued to do the work, like I said, I've found mentors like Wayne Dyer, Ram Dass, different people. Um, and I'll re-listen to some of their speeches or reread their books like over and over. And it just every time I do, something new comes out.
So I actually have a question for you because I actually, you know how I made the reel, so I want to talk about some nerd stuff. But my question for you is, do you ever feel like stuff from past lives, if you didn't learn the lesson then in this one, you're still they kind of like carry over in a way?
Absolutely. I've talked to you a little bit about Dolores Cannon for anybody who hasn't seen her work. She died in 2015, I believe, but check out her work. She did a lot of work just working with people. She did, just deep hypnotherapy with people and like stuff would come up from their past lives. And then she wrote a bunch of books out of just basically getting all this info from these folks. But she used to say that all the time. She goes, if you don't deal with like karma right now, whatever it is that you have going
Karma.
on,
There you go.
yeah, whatever it is you have going on right now, you're going to carry it with you again. You're going to have to come back and like, you're going to have to deal with it again until you clear all of it, right?
Right. That's the whole concept was to why we come back, right? Because there's a theory, or they say that once you learn everything, that's when you ascend. But if
Well,
you don't,
that's when you don't have to come back anymore. Pretty much
right.
is what my understanding.
But what I was getting into, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because so my wife did a past life reading on me, right? And I've always in this life, I've always been hardcore on like the warrior spirit, honor, all that shit. And she did it. This was years ago, a long time ago.
Mhm.
But it gave me some perspective because I was like, holy fuck. I wasn't very, I wasn't very happy about it. but she did, well, she did a couple of them. The one, I was adopted. Apparently, she had this vision and everything. Like I was on a farm. She's like, you're very close with animals, blah blah blah. You didn't have a lot of friends, but you developed this relationship, this bond with animals. And I'm like, well, that makes sense because animals fucking love me for some reason.
There you
Um, but then, and there's two parts to this. So the first part I'll say is that she's in another one. She said the reason why you're so adamant about honor and all that kind of stuff in this life is because in your last one you were a fucking criminal.
go. Oh,
I was like, what?
that
You
makes
know,
sense.
and my ego is like, oh, I'm gonna be a fucking warrior in the fucking
Yeah.
1200s or some shit. Nope, I was fucking like robbing trains or some shit, and I got caught up with the law apparently. Um, but the reason why the other part of that is because I really thought about what she said about the adopted part, and I was like, it kind of like resonated with me because I'm not really like the rest of I am like them, but I'm not like the rest of my family, you know?
Uh huh.
Like like we've talked about being the black sheep or like being the ones to break the cycle.
Hmm.
But she was like, because I'm a super nerd, like I'm not when I was talking to you about the Dark Knight and Batman and shit, right? I
Yeah.
always see a deeper meaning in that stuff than just, oh, it's Batman. You know what I mean? If you really pay attention, well, for me, if you really pay attention, there are so many life lessons in those types of films, if you really just sit and watch it and just pay attention, you have an open mind instead of being like, oh, Batman flew off the roof. That's not realistic or some shit. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But she's like, she was like, oh, that makes sense because you've always resonated with like these characters like Superman or Batman that are like basically orphans, but they turn out to be good people who try to help everybody
Mhm.
at their own, even at their own sacrifice, right? Because that's like the definition, or that's like what a hero does basically. But the reason why I want to talk about it is because like with that, it resonated with me a lot. And then I realized like, oh, so the way she made it sound was like this life I'm in now is the one that makes up for that last one, basically. Like You were a criminal then, but now in this life, you're so focused on being good and honor and all that other shit that you're trying to basically, like, your spirit is trying to make up for it in a way, or learn that lesson, you know?
You're probably, yeah. I mean, you're probably just like we said, you're probably just clearing that old karma. I mean, and that's one of the things that Dolores Cannon used to speak a lot of. Is she used to say, we have to come here and experience being in different positions, like whether we're a woman in a lifetime or we're whatever, right? Like you experience different things. But like you said, I mean, like if you accrued that negative karma, she would always say, and you didn't clear it in this lifetime, she's like, then you're gonna come back with it until you
Mhm.
clear it, right? It's kind of like you and I've talked about before. I'm like, yeah, I was like, I'm trying to grow and work on myself and clear every damn thing I possibly can so that I don't carry anything out. That's the goal anyway.
Yeah, because like, you know, I'll get on little binges where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna watch Batman because I'm like, I don't know, it just resonates with me so much just because, like, he doesn't kill anybody, and it's kind of like almost a self-defeating fight because he doesn't kill his enemies, so like they just keep resurfacing, right? And it's constant battle, but in a way that is noble because he's like, oh, I won't be any better than them if I kill. But also the lessons of like the big thing I took away from like the Christian Bale Batman movies, like The Dark Knight, Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises, is that it's about him. Like no matter what happens, he's like, I'm gonna self-sacrifice for the
Mhm.
greater good for the city, and that resonates with me a lot because, like we talked about, we're here to help people,
Mhm.
and even though it might be a detriment, if depending on your perspective, like, and you may agree with this, like I'll help people even if it means my own sacrifice, depending if it gets to that level, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So like that resonates with me a lot, which is why I was like, oh. And then when I made that reel where it's like the shadows betray you because they belong to me, it made me think about our conversation, like we were just talking about with like, dude, this shit's not stressful. I've been through fucking worse shit than this, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it makes me think, it's like, yeah, because I've been in the darkness before. So if you've walked through hell, not much is going to bother you after that. You know what I mean? So it's like that saying of the shadows betray you because they belong to me. One, that's pretty badass. But
Yeah.
two, but two, there's something to learn from that
Yeah.
because that's like empowering, but also like acknowledging that, all right, well, I already have perspective on this because I've been through hell. So I can accomplish anything, basically. That's what I take away from it. But
No, yeah, absolutely. Sure. And like you said, a lot of those movies, I mean, if you do pay closer attention to them, they do. I mean, it's like a lot of movies over the years. If you look back on a lot of these different movies, like what was it, Star Wars, and there was there was the Shadow which was Darth Vader, right? And then you had like Luke, you know what I mean? So like there's a bigger meaning in all of these movies a lot of times. I think that obviously the writers and the directors have purpose when they write a lot of this stuff. It's something coming out of them, right? And there is a greater lesson in all of it. But it is, like you said, it's embracing those shadows, embracing the times you've been through the dark, in the dark. I mean, I think about like Wayne Dyer always said, he goes, the people that come to this life with the biggest dharma, the biggest purposes, tend to have the hardest lives. And I tend to agree with that. Like you go through a lot more shit, so that you can learn a lot more. But then at the end of the day, you can help a lot more people with that.
yeah,
you know and I think that's the whole thing is, I try to tell people, like, I try to take what I've learned in my life and what I continue to learn, and help as many people as I can. So if I have any situation where I meet somebody and we just get into a conversation and I can hear and see their hurt, I take that opportunity to, like you said, to actively listen. So just listen to what they're saying, and then I start to hear the pain, and you can go deep with a person, even in a 5-10 minute conversation of this stranger. And half the time, I have times where I come out of it, they're like, man, can I get your number so I can give you a call? So I'm like, yeah, absolutely, because I gave them the opportunity to sit and talk and actually open up, because I cared enough. Because I mean, honestly, that's at the end of the day, man, that's why we're here, is to connect with other humans and help, bring as much light to this to this earth as possible. That's what I believe. I mean, that's why where's light, right? I mean, it's just bring light and love to the world. That's why we're here. So
Yeah, I mean, and when you think about it, when you were talking earlier about men, men don't really have that outlet,
I know.
right? Men don't, honestly, in today's society, like, and there's a lot of things that go into this because we've all been fucking basically shunned. It was like, oh, you're just a man, you're a bigot, you're fucking whatever, you're savage, basically. But it's like like you said, it's frowned upon for men to cry or to like express feelings and emotions because in our primal brains, it's like, oh, that's a weakness, right? But in reality, it's a strength
Yeah.
because if you go through things and you have, it takes, honestly, it takes courage to talk about that shit, right?
Yeah.
It takes courage to even acknowledge that you have something that you're holding on to. And the more you express it and deal with it in a healthy way instead of just suppressing it, you suppress it for too long, it's going to kill you, basically. It might not kill you.
Absolutely.
It might take fucking 80 years, but you're still going to go to the grave with that shit unresolved because you never released it, you know?
Yeah. And like you said, unfortunately, a lot of men don't have that outlet. And I try to give that, and if that's something I can work on giving a bigger platform for people to be able, especially men, to be able to come and talk about things. Because, I've sat with guys that, you look at them, they look like the, biggest badass that there is. But yet when you sit and go deep and get into the layers of who they are,
Yeah, sometimes it's a front.
mask. It's a mask, and I tell people all the time, I'm like, you don't got to wear that mask. You don't got to run around acting like you're all tough just because you're hurting inside. You know, you can be big muscles, tattoos, whatever, but you can still be super nice. You know what I mean? As my son would say, he says that, people look at me and think that like, oh, whatever. He goes, but he always tells his friends like, oh, he's a big teddy bear. And I'm like, I'm glad. Like, I'd rather be that way now than carrying around unwarranted, I guess you could say, anger that I used to carry around. You know what I'm saying? I don't feel like I have to do that anymore. So I can truly be myself and be a loving person. Doesn't matter. I don't feel weak because I'm more of a loving guy. You know?
Well, you're an example of what Jordan Peterson said is that make yourself a monster and then learn to control it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's also in the reality of our human existence, right? Generally speaking, men are stronger, men are more apt for physical violence and for, you know, being more aggressive because our primal biology, that's pretty much what we are, right? I always refer to humans as like the human animal because we are animals, right? We just have a consciousness and I could go on a tangent about how we're all connected, like all that stuff. But um like we have a like men specifically have a duty to protect those around them.
Yeah.
So, like that selfless service or that sacrifice, like you ever see those memes where it's like, oh, the masculine urge to stay and fight, while your loved ones run away. Like that's what I feel like there's like something in each man that's a part of you,
Hmm.
but there's some men who never realize that about themselves because they've been taught, oh, it's bad to be aggressive, or oh, it's bad to, even if you're standing up for yourself and you're not being violent, like some people will be like, oh, you're just a man, or you're fucking a toxic masculinity, blah blah blah. It's like, no, there's a difference. Toxic masculinity is being weak, right?
Hmm.
Toxic masculinity is being weak in mind, body, and spirit.
Yep.
Because if you're weak in your mind, then you're easily manipulated. If you're weak in your body, then you're not going to be able to fucking protect anybody. And if you're weak in your spirit, then you're never going to have the will to do anything
Yeah.
positive.
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely true. For sure. And it's like you said, I mean, and that takes what? That takes the work. That's what we're talking about, right? I mean, it takes the work on who we are. And that takes looking at every aspect of yourself and being able to embrace yourself as a whole and becoming that better, stronger mind, body, and soul version of who you are, right? And that's consistent work. And I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. It's consistently just day in and day out working on yourself. And you're gonna stumble and you're gonna fall and you're gonna hit areas you don't want to be in. But as you continue to just be persistent, eventually you start to feel and see a lot of change within yourself. and you start to really identify with the whole of who you really are.
Yeah, because for example, I still deal with this shit today. Like, I still like this is a like shadow. Like, working on yourself is a life thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm not the same man I was even a year ago, or a
Yeah.
month ago, or 2 months ago. And then in another 10 years, I'm not going to be the same man that I am now because I'm going to grow and learn, right?
Exactly.
Like, for example, I think I've talked about this before, but uh, like you mentioned anger, right? I was raised around anger, so I thought that was the way you handled things because there is certain power in it, but it doesn't really, if you allow it to control you, it doesn't serve you at all. So
Well,
now, yeah, so now because I am in the position I am mentally and spiritually, I'm teaching my son instead of like getting up because I used to just get mad at him when he'd get mad, and we just butt heads, right? Even though he's a little kid, I'm like, dude, why are you so mad, right? I'm like, oh, because you're me. So I'm like, but now I'm in the habit of being like, hey, buddy, what are you doing right now? Like, talk him through it. Like, I was like, what does daddy tell you about anger? And he's like, what? And then I always have to say it, but I'm like, or especially that's actually why I started having him do hockey because it's a way for him to get energy out, but it's also a chance for me to teach him lessons, not
mhm.
just the sport, but with life. So
Yeah.
he gets mad, and when you get angry, sometimes you lose control and you can't do things properly. So you get mad, and I'll just very calmly be like, "Hey, son, what are you doing right now?" He's like, "I'm trying to get the ball in the goal," and I'm like, "Okay, but why are you angry?" He's like, "I don't know," and I'm like, "Your anger doesn't serve you. So calm down and focus." You know what I mean? It's important to teach. It's especially important to teach boys that, especially like we're talking about masculinity and stuff. So instead of responding to anger with anger, like you're just fighting fire with fire, right?
Mhm.
And you probably have experienced this and agree with it. Um, but now I've taken on a more like, I guess I've sort of fine tuned my mentorship. Like, I still have moments where I'm like, bro, you know,
Oh
but
yeah.
not nearly as many as I used to have. But I'll just be like, hey, buddy, like, anger doesn't serve you. When you get angry, you can't focus, and you're just gonna hurt yourself, basically. Even if it's not like physically, but it's you don't want to have that. Um, it's almost like you're relying on it to fuel you forward, but not realizing that it's not exactly that healthy.
Well, no, and you think about how many bad decisions come from an angry moment. You know what I mean? I mean, you do something or say something that you normally would not have if you would have just slowed down a little bit and put your ass into check. You know what I mean? Um, and that's it's the bottom line. I mean, that's why it's like, for me, if I start to feel that well up, I am pretty good now about being able to just like just really get it under control and why is this triggering me, right? Because like I tell people, if you're triggered by something anyway, this again is work that you got to do within yourself. Because if you're triggered by someone else's actions, there's something about that that's inside of you that you need to deal with.
Dude, that's a yes. And when you look at all this bullshit with like uh everyone's offended these days, it's like that's not my fucking problem, right? I'll try to help you, but at the same time, don't blame others for your own bullshit.
Well, we've
You
talked
know?
about it. It's easy for people to blame and not look at themselves. That's why I tell people that some of the hardest work you can do is look at yourself, right? Because then you're not pointing the finger anymore. Now you're pointing the finger at yourself and you're saying, okay, this is all my responsibility. And that's what I think it is truly us taking responsibility for our own lives and being like, okay, like I gotta fix my shit. Like you said, it's not we're all here to help each other, but at the end of the day, it's not my job to go fix anybody else. It's my job to fix me, and then in turn I become that light for other people.
Right. But as a society, it appears to be that institutions are like, no, it's okay. Like, you're just angry. They don't teach them any coping skills or any ways to release it. They're just like, oh, you're fine just the way you are. Like, no, maybe you're not. maybe you should acknowledge it. And even for a young person to hear that could be life changing, you know?
Absolutely. That's why I think, something I've said, I may have told you, but I've shared, is that, I'd love to go within like our school systems and be able to go to literally all the schools and have have other people helping and teaching meditation daily for all the kids. Like literally mindfulness and meditation. Have all these kids from a very young age start to learn these natural tools that can help them be better in life. Imagine how things would change if from very young these kids knew, like, oh, I can like literally go find a quiet space every day, go within, find that inner peace, find that inner calm, evaluate myself. You know what I'm saying? Teach these kids that kind of stuff. The schools don't, I'm not saying there's none that do that, but it's not a common practice, which it should be for all
Yeah.
of them.
And actually, that's a good point because, like, we talked about how I'll do prayers and I'm basically like channeling. So, like what you just said, go find a quiet space and like chill out basically and get yourself collected. Like, compared to years ago, now I can do that like almost in the moment if I focus, you know what I mean? Like if I start to feel like you said, like if I start to feel myself get upset or something like that, like even if I'm around other people, there's noise, whatever, I can like in that moment I can go internal and be like, okay, one is it's a little bit logical because you're like, oh, if I react this way, then it's not going to be good, right? But two, you're also acknowledging that fucking inner beast that we all have, you know what I mean? So it's like, all right, I'm gonna chill out because, and that's also a part of what we were talking about with understanding is like, oh, something goes wrong, it pisses you off. One, why does it piss you off? And two, what was the intention behind that action that somebody else may have done that made you upset, right? Do you understand the situation? Because that person may not have realized that, oh, they did something wrong, number one, and number two, that they may not have even meant, they probably didn't even know that it was like incorrect or wrong, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that I take a lot more time now to do is to try to look at the other person's point of view and honestly to really look at like what is it that they're dealing with inside of them or that they're not dealing with, and that's why they're saying what they're saying or doing what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? Because I think so often we just, oh, you said something that offended me, I'm pissed off. Well, guess what? Maybe if you just took like 5 minutes and thought about why did that person say that, what's that person going through, you might look beyond yourself and be like, oh, there's more going on here,
And you
right?
know what's funny about that? What happens to us all the time, right? How often have we had people just kind of like, we just met, like you said, just meet them. Like when you start to do this type of work on yourself and you start to heal yourself, right? You may find that random fucking people that you don't know, they meet you in a few seconds, they're telling you the life story.
Yep.
You know, it's like it's like maybe it's an energy thing. Like they sense in some part of them in their subconscious or whatever that, oh, you know what, this stuff's been weighing on me, and maybe because we've done our own work, now we're able to help others, and there's like a invisible like line, like, oh, let me put a line out to this person and like pull myself in on land, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I
It happens all the time.
Yeah, me too. And I always say there's no coincidences. There's no mistakes as far as, that's how I believe. I believe everything has a purpose and a reason. So I believe that, when you started to do that work and you're doing these things, you've experienced some healing, that yes, a person will be put in your path so that you can now have that conversation with them. And especially if you slow down enough, then you will meet these people and you will have these conversations, right? Instead of just, people, I tell people slow down. Like people will say, hey, how you doing? And not even wait for a response. Like, so you really didn't care. That's just something you're saying because that's what you were taught to say. Like, hey, how you doing? Why don't you be like, hey, how are you like really doing? Because a person might say, well, shit, I'm battling some severe depression right now. Who knows, right? But if you give people the time and you actually care with your heart, you will find those will just come to you. Those conversations and those people just needed to hear something from you that day. You know, that's why I say we are all truly here to help each other, not see how much more stupid shit we can get done that was unnecessary.
Yeah, I firmly believe that we were put here to help guide people, which is the whole reason why we wanted to start this podcast in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely,
Is to
absolutely.
like, how can we reach people? Uh, and even if it only helps one person, then it's worth it because then that person could grow and go on and to help other people. You don't know, right?
Absolutely. That's the whole thing, man. Is like, you impacting one, like you said, just like us or anybody impacting somebody's life in a positive way. That one person could be the person that goes out and makes massive change in your country, or who knows? You never know, right? But because you gave them that time, or you gave them this platform, something to be like, hey, we're here to try to bring light and help. And like you said, we wanted to hit as many people as we can so that they have a place. And then if they want to ask questions, if they want to, whatever the case is, they can reach out. I always tell people, I always make myself available to people because I like to give people a safe space to be able to come and talk about things, to be able to open up to me about things that they don't talk to anybody else about. You know,
Yeah, I think that's important because I think a lot of people are hesitant because you know they're probably so worried about being judged
hmm
or they're worried about what people will think about them. Instead of because most people will probably be like, oh well, you need to do this. Most people will tell you what you need to do, right? They'll just give you like uh little pointers and like little advice, but they won't actually like acknowledge what you're going through, right? Because it's easy to be an armchair quarterback, right? It's
oh yeah,
easy, like when you're watching something on TV and you're like, oh, I would have done this. It's like, oh, really? Were you in that situation?
yeah,
You don't like we talked about this. Like, you don't know what you're gonna do until you're in that fucking situation, right?
hmm
There's no way. I mean, there is a way, kind of, but in reality, if you don't experience it, then you can't sit there and say, oh, I would do this because you're not in it.
exactly.
So I think a lot of us put these predispositioned beliefs on people by judging them, and it doesn't help anybody.
No, exactly. See, that's one of those things. It's funny because I truly believe that one of the biggest reasons, which I'm sure I've said before, that we're here is to learn no judgment. Right. And you and I were having that conversation a little bit ago too, talking about, I do my very best to accept everybody for who they are, for what they're doing, for what they're going through. Am I perfect at it? Absolutely not. But I try my best each day just because I know that everybody's going through something. You know what I'm saying? So instead of judging folks for their actions or for what they do, try to empathize and see, hey, why are they doing what they're doing? You know?
You know what led me to that actually is that I'm grateful for my time in the military because, I'm from a small town, you know. No one ever I was me and my cousin were the only ones to leave
Yeah.
from our family because like I said, I think I told you before, my cousin's basically like my older brother because we were close. We were pretty close. We still are. And like but when I was growing up, from my grandfather and stuff, I've always felt it's important. I don't know why. I just always felt it's important to kind of like know where you come from, right? So heritage was a huge part of my upbringing, right? Like, oh, we're Lebanese. Oh, this is our food. Blah blah blah. This is the story of our family. Like these people came over here. They fought in World War I, World War II. Like American. Like I pretty much come from a family of patriots, right? But it's still a limited point of view, right?
Mhm.
But what I'm saying is I'm grateful for my time in the military because what I realized from that and what kind of reinforced when I talk about like that human animal side, like you realize if you travel or if you meet a lot of different people from different places, we're all the fucking same.
Yeah.
We are all the same. The only thing that makes us different is what programming we were raised on, you know?
Yeah.
And but then when you take a step back, because I'm a kind of person that's always kind of looked at the big picture, and I can like deduce things from like looking at history or looking at like even the news, whatever. I don't really watch it that often, but whenever I hear something, I'm like, okay, right? Because I'm like, that's bullshit, whatever. Um, but we're all the same.
Yeah.
We are all the same. We all have the same needs, you know, and we all are just trying to live life the best way that we can. And I even realized that uh, in fucking Afghanistan when we were working with the locals, and there was like I was talking to my cousin because he mentioned something about it, I think, and I was like, dude, the withdrawal was a fucking shame. You know what I mean? Like 20 years, 20 plus years, all those people were killed, and for what? And then, but not just from an American's point of view, but then I remember the locals that worked for us. You know, who knows? Maybe they weren't as genuine as they appeared to be, but to me, I believe that they were, because you don't know who the enemy is and who's not. But to me, they seemed like pretty decent people, right? And I remember, I'll never forget, this dude was like, "Yeah, I have 13 kids, and I'm so grateful that Americans are here to help me work to provide for them." Right? That's a human thing, man. To be able to
Yeah.
provide for your loved ones. And then the Afghanistan withdrawal happened, and I got all these fucking I'm sitting at my kitchen table with a beer. This was whenever that was. I don't even remember what year it was now. All the years start to merge together.
Yeah.
um, but I started to think about that guy, and I'm like, man, he might be fucking dead right now, you know? And it's
Yeah.
like, what a tragedy, because when I was there, I was around kids too, like like local children, and I'm like, fuck, dude, like that hit me hard because I'm like, the comparison from the United States to like a third world country, and you're looking at these kids who are living in fucking mud huts and like around war and shit. Like we talked about being an empath. I felt bad for these kids, man.
Oh yeah.
But that
Absolutely.
but that reinforced that kind of helped me get perspective and reinforce like we're all the same. Like we all have good in us, we all have bad in us. If we don't acknowledge the bad, then it's just gonna keep fucking dragging along until we fix it.
Yeah. It's just gonna keep rearing its ugly head. You know. That's why, again, like I said, it's truly facing the whole of who we are. And that's every aspect. That's even the aspects that, we often beat ourselves up internally. And that's why I tell people, like, love yourself, even with all of your shit, and just work on it, you know? And you won't be perfect. You'll make mistakes. You'll do things along that road. But if you can acknowledge that you're working on yourself and you're trying to better every aspect of you and embrace you as a whole each day, then you can at least go to bed and be like, hey, I know I'm doing my best. I may have faltered today, I may have had a shitty day, but guess what? I'm still doing the work. I'm trying.
That's
You know,
important because each day is a new day to make a change.
absolutely.
Like we talk about, the only moment that matters is right now.
Hmm.
So it's the only time that exists is right now.
It really,
So yeah, because that can help you get perspective. Like, okay, this shit happened a week ago, but I'm gonna keep moving forward. You know.
yeah, yeah. And you look at, yeah, like you said, it's looking at this present moment instead of living in, as humans, we so often want to live in what you did a year ago, 6 years ago, whatever, or we want to live in the future that doesn't even exist. That we're thinking, oh shit, what's going to happen in on Thursday? What does it matter? Monday,
Yeah.
that's all you got.
There's just as much danger in living in the past as there is living in a what if
Yeah,
constant state of mind.
yeah,
Because, like
absolutely.
we mentioned in the last episode, that's also a lack of faith.
Yeah. That's why I say I truly live by believing that life's always working for me and that it's always here to help me. And because of that, like even when things don't seem the best, don't get me wrong, I have moments where I'm like, shit, I want this to change. But I will always look at it and say, okay, well, what do I got to do to help it change? You know what I'm
And
saying?
that's another thing too is, some things you can't change, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
So a part of that is accepting things for what they are.
Well, yeah, and
Mhm.
I believe we come here with, like I've said before, like a soul blueprint, for lack of better words, and that we have things that we have to experience and go through, and then be able to help others with. So I believe that like our soul comes here. So yeah, you just accept the fact that your soul is intended to go through whatever that situation is. You know what I'm saying? So if you can look at it that way, you're like, okay, and you know it's temporary. You know that like there's truly, that's why they always say, you know, like no storm lasts forever. It's true, because even when we're going through those challenging times, you can always look back and be like, and not living in the past, but you can always look back and be like, oh shit, I made it through that rough time a year ago or whatever it was. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
and if you do believe life's always working for you, you'll tend to see how things just come together just the way they're supposed to.
It is funny once you start working on that stuff, how things start to align.
Oh yeah.
It's like when we met and things started to just like work out like like I told you when we met. Like, dude, like our first conversation ever. I was like, holy shit, we're talking about this stuff that's never happened, right? And then as we work together, like things were just manifesting at a fucking accelerated rate, but for positive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's again, like we said, you know, like I said, I don't believe there's anything as a coincidence or an accident. So it's like we were put in each other's path for a reason. And that's why we connected so quickly in our first conversation. And it was just like, okay, like we were intended to meet. That's what this was all about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know, and it's true. The rest is history. I mean, that's just truly, like I say, you know, things. A lot of times, if you like, you do start to see all the synchronicities and all the connections. You can connect the dots when you slow down and start doing this internal work, and you look at things, and you're like, oh, I was supposed to do that. Oh, I was supposed to go there. I was supposed to meet that person. Whatever it is, right? Um, it's that human mind, the ego, that thinks that there's, you know, there's always supposed to be some logical reason of why things happen. And I tell people, I'm like, our logic half the time has got us to a bunch of stupid places. So why don't we start living more off of like the spirit and out of the heart and watch how things do align and come together the way they're supposed to?
Well, you just reminded me another concept I wanted to talk about is you mentioned basically synchronicities, right? But synchronicities, a lot of people would be like, oh, numbers, patterns, whatnot. I believe, and you then feel free to put your input in here. But you remember how I was texting you about Batman, right? But the symbol, like animal. There's like I believe in certain like basically like spirit animals almost, right? Where um so when I was going like when I messaged you about what we were going to talk about for this episode, one thing I wanted to bring up is what I mentioned earlier when I was going through that shadow, what I call that shadow period, right?
Mm-hmm.
You and I have seen we know synchronicities, we know what it means, we acknowledge it, we research it, yada yada. But what's crazy to me, and which to me is another proof of that everything is connected, is that for my experience, if I'm dealing with something or thinking or even thinking about something, I feel like at certain times animals are sort of like signs from the ascended masters or the angels or God or however you want to define it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was going through that shadow period, what's crazy is I was thinking like I'm changing right now. Like I'm going through this. I called it evolving, right? Like we've talked about. And then I went on a walk with my family, and fucking same day I had those thoughts. We don't believe in coincidence. There's a bat following us over my head, like up in like. So our streets, they're not very wide, but they're two lanes. So it's one oncoming, one going, right? And there's trees. There's usually like house and then trees because we basically live in the woods. And we were walking a circle in our neighborhood, and there's a fucking bat. I saw when I was going through that, there was a bats like I saw a bat the night before fly over my head in the driveway, and then when we went on that walk, it followed us pretty much almost the whole loop. And I'm like, what does that mean? So I researched it, and I'm like, oh, that is very interesting, right? So so generally speaking, a bat is symbolic of transformation,
Okay.
spiritual transformation too. And I was like, holy shit.
That's awesome.
I was like, what are the, so that's what kind of reinforces when you see synchronicities, that's how that's kind of like God or a higher power telling you like, hey buddy, this is a lesson. You're on the right track. Keep going.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I was like, oh, well, that's fucking crazy. Because, for example, if I'm thinking about my family or something, I'll see deer, and deer are symbolic of family. Or
Awesome.
like they say that if you see a cardinal, that's a loved one coming to visit you.
Hmm.
And I see stuff like that all the time. When, especially if I'm thinking about something, or like if I'm praying about a certain thing, I'm like, oh. And then like, or like a hummingbird. I think I told you about the hummingbird, didn't I? Where it was like flying, it was like hovering, and it was like looking at me through my living room window, like hovering, like, oh, what's up? That never happened in the 2 years I lived here.
Awesome. And hummingbirds are amazing. We have them here a lot, and it's funny. We've been definitely times where I'm out, praying and or just I'm out with my eyes closed and just like a lot of times during the day I'll be out in the sun and praying. I've had them just like you said, I've had them actually like I can hear their little wings. I open my eyes and they're just kind of hover right there above me, which is really cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do believe that too. I do believe that through animals, obviously they all have spirits as well. So like they find their way to us to connect to us and show us something. You know.
Do you have
So
any experiences with animals other than hummingbirds?
So the hummingbirds I've had. One of the things I have kind of often is butterflies come like right by me. I can be outside and like just come right in front of my face, come over the top of me, and that happens often, which is crazy because that's according to what I've studied, it's a very spiritual sign as well. And then like I've told you before, how like there was the time I was visiting family not that long ago, and that little dog. Um,
Oh yeah.
People were walking the dog and it just stopped, just stopped, sat down and just stared at me. And I was like, they're like, whoa, they're like, he's never done it before. It was awesome. He was just staring at me and I was talking to him. He just kind of turned his head and then they took off. So, there's little things. I don't know what that, I don't always know what it means, but like, I feel like those are signs from, from God, from the spirit world showing us like, hey, there's a lot more going on if you slow down enough to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, just like the other actually yesterday I did like a 3 mile ruck march, and this lady was walking towards me with her dog, and the dog was off the leash, and I was like, oh, I know what's about to happen, right? So I'm not even like a quarter of a mile away. It's like pretty close. But this dog is like looking at me, and I look at it, and I'm just trying to like walk so I don't basically bother that person and have their dog like follow me. But the dog just ran right up to me anyway. It was like, hey, and he wanted to play with me.
That's awesome.
And we've talked about that stuff before too, where like kids or animals, specifically like, well, most of the time dogs, because it's the most common kind
Hmm.
of animal we're around, is like if animals or children, for example, they can kind of sense that you're a good spirit. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So that's happened to me my whole life.
Yeah, I've had a lot of that as well. I think honestly, it's just the energy you give off, right? I mean, like obviously we know like animals, um, because of us thinking from our human mind so often is we kind of tend to put on, like pump the brakes, but like kids or animals, like they live from the spirit if they haven't been, especially like kids, if they haven't been conditioned yet, they're just like, oh hey, and they want to come to and
Yeah.
which is because I mean, in all reality, like yeah, use discernment, but at the same time, like I tell people, in all reality, like we should be living from that. You know what I mean? We should be that's why I say live from the heart center, live from your heart, because you'll start to see that there is a lot more good than anything out there. You have the media and stuff who wants to make it seem like everything's so negative, and I'm like, man, there's so much more good out there. They just don't publicize it.
Yeah, just shut your TV off, go outside,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, what I say. I don't watch the news. I don't watch any of that crap. I look at the world from a different lens.
well,
So
it's just like racism, right? Like you ever see those kids, the white kid and the black kid hugging each other, and they're like babies, basically. It's like we are not naturally inclined to hate.
no, not at all.
I don't believe that we are.
No, I completely agree. We're not.
I feel
Like
like
I
all that stuff is taught.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. When you come into human form as a baby, you're pure and clean and you love everybody. You know what I mean? That's like the most beautiful sight right there is you have this child who truly just loves everybody, doesn't look at anybody for their color, for any of that, right? Until like you said, until you're programmed to believe that, you know. And like I tell everybody, I love the different. I love that we're all different. I love that all the differences we have, the different foods and culture that we bring. I mean, that's what makes this place exciting. You know,
Yeah, if everything was the same, it would be boring as hell, and we'd hate our life.
I always say it'd be so shitty if everybody was just alike, like all the time. I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, that seems like the course they're trying to put us on with everything that's happening.
In a lot of sense, it is. That's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to condition everybody to be the same. But like I said, that's where again, like we talked about earlier, that's where we have to think differently. We got to think for ourselves. You know, we don't got to follow the bullshit. I always tell people the only reason these certain things exist is because we've agreed upon them,
Yeah.
right? When we stop agreeing, shit changes.
Well, yeah, we talked about before too how we kind of have rebellious spirits, like no, I'm not going to listen to the bullshit you're spewing. I'm going to do my thing. Because I believe that each person, no matter I would even argue no matter how much you've been programmed, deep down you know what's right and wrong.
Oh yeah,
You
you
know,
can.
and it's not just logical, it's a feeling.
That's your intuition, right? That's your soul speaking. That's why I say, like, if we all learn to live from that space, things would be totally
Yeah.
different. Totally different.
I know that's what's like, man. That's why, yeah, my perspective changed too. Because when I was younger, like when I joined the military, I was like, "Oh yeah, war," because I was stupid and young and didn't really understand. And then I fucking went to one, and I was like, "Oh, this shit sucks."
Yeah.
and now, and now I'm like, now I'm older, and I'm like, and you look at history, it's like, what the fuck is the point of all this war? You know why war happens is because fucking people just can't agree on something.
It's ego, right?
Yeah.
And that's
It's
truly what.
it's ego and it's the love of power, I would say.
Yeah. Yep. And that's why I say we're not here to overpower anybody, in my opinion. You know, we're all here to be connected, to help each other. I
Yeah.
mean, people can say whatever they want to that, but that's truly how I try to look at things. Is like, I'm gonna try to be here to help as many people as I possibly can while I'm in this human form. You know, so
Yeah. It's just, but again, that kind of circles back to, I guess maybe a part of shadow work too is almost like, I think kind of what we touched on too is like in a way, you're kind of undoing your programming.
yeah. Well, it
Because,
really is. Really, what it is we're programmed for all those years, and then now it's like I always try to say that, like, I have my grandkids, and I'm like, I want to help. I mean, they have their parents, but it's like I want to help them to have that very open, pure mind and heart, like from this point going forward, and not be programmed, because then you have to spend years like reprogramming yourself to what you really feel inside of. You know what I'm saying? Um, and that's why I say, like you said, I mean, it's like, instead of taking what you were given, because, even people with all their well intentions, they hand things to you that they're handed to them. It's like, I tell people, go within and look at everything and say, okay, does this sit well with my soul? If it doesn't, then it's not for you.
mhm. Yeah.
You
And
know?
also, I guess I'll add to that is that this is in no way like, oh, I'm just going to do things off a whim because it feels right,
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
because there's also a danger in that too, if you're just kind of willy nilly doing what you want. Because there's a difference. I believe that there's a difference between doing what you want versus doing what you need, right?
Hmm.
So, like, oh, Brian and Nate said I got to free myself from my programming, so I'm gonna go fucking race a car down the highway or some shit, Like, no, like, have some sense about it,
Well,
right?
that's where, like I said earlier, is using discernment, right? I mean, you still got to use discernment. You know, I mean, that's just a given in this human form. I mean, you cannot, and then you're gonna end up really doing some dumb shit. But hey, it's all good.
Yeah, you just end up in jail or something, it's fine.
Yeah.
But uh, but yeah, man, it's just it almost feels like once you get on like kind of like I was going back to like David Goggins says, like once you get on the other side of suffering, like once you actually go through it, like it's almost like life is more beautiful because you worked on that shadow part of yourself to heal because to do it, you're healing yourself at the same time,
Yeah.
right? So like now where I am now versus where I was even like a year ago, like my perspective is like it's more clear, I guess I should say.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And that's I mean, dude, that's what this work does, right? Is like doing the work on ourselves gives us more clarity into the deeper aspects of this life. Because I think about how like I look way deeper into things now than I ever used to because I was just living on that superficial, like I said, 3D plane of just, oh, go to work, blah blah blah, do your stuff. But it's like now I look way deeper, and it's like I love being able to try to help people see the deeper sides of it because then they realize like all these systems and shit that we've been handed. Like half the time you look at this stuff and you're like, this shit doesn't even make any sense. Why are we following this? You know, and it's because we were programmed to believe that that's what we're supposed to do instead of looking at it on a deeper level and being like, I don't want to do that. Like, no, like I told you earlier, when we stop agreeing upon the nonsense we've been handed, then the world will change. So,
Yeah, because, I believe, in the fact that all humans have the right to liberty.
mhm.
I believe that because that's naturally, not only naturally, but I do believe it's a God given right. God didn't put us here to be slaves
No, yeah,
to,
exactly.
to he didn't put us here to be slaves to each other.
Yeah.
But what does mankind do? We're always like subjugating someone. Like there could be an argument made right now that the working class, or I guess you could say, and pretty much anyone who has a job, we're basically almost like modern day. Uh, this is going to be kind of controversial, but we're almost, if you look at it from a perspective of what the hell are we doing here, we're almost like modern day slaves. What do? We fucking work all the time. We work most of our life actually. And like I told you before, George Carlin said it. He's like, they want you just smart enough to run the machines, but dumb enough not to ask any questions, right? And my
Yep.
dad was always like, he's fucking right. And I was a little kid when I saw that. And then I've seen it repeatedly throughout my life. I'm like, damn, that motherfucker had a point. Because
It's true.
they don't want people to ask questions. Because then once people start asking questions and like questioning, like, what the fuck are we doing?
Hmm.
Like, why are you fucking living in a goddamn mansion and I'm over here working more hours than you a week, but I'm fucking suffering
Yeah.
because and it's complicated because you could make an argument for, oh well, that person has the mansion, they worked for it. Like, yeah, I agree, because that's what capitalism is. I I think capitalism is a good system, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
I would say it's definitely better than, like, obviously better than communism or something like that, because in communism you could be working, but then your neighbor gets the same fucking benefits you get. You know what I mean? Which is almost kind of like the border right now, right? All these fucking well, all these immigrants who are coming across the border, what are they getting? They're getting fucking cell phones. Everything you see in the news, they got clean ass clothes. It's like, yo, they're getting, like, certain cities are like, oh, we're gonna house you here, and it's like, and then you got Americans suffering on the streets or suffering to pay the bills when it's like, what is going on? So it's like it's almost like it. If you look at it from a big picture standpoint, in a way, it's like transitioning to like more control, but everyone has less.
Well, that's what they're trying to do, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
like I watch the news, but that's from everything I have seen and observed, and is that they're trying to make things look real pretty, but all they're really doing is little by little trying to take more control.
Yeah.
And that's why I say all of us, have to go deeper and wake up to that and realize we don't have to be okay with these governmental systems that are built off of bullshit. Because once we stand together and say we no longer agree to any of this, what are they going to do?
Yeah. I mean, power in numbers.
That's what I mean. And I guarantee you there's a whole lot more of us that, and more people are waking up and starting to see through all the bullshit. And they're like, wait a minute, why am I agreeing to this? You
Hmm.
don't, we don't have to, and like I said, the change makers are the ones like people like Gandhi and these people that came and said, you know what, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm going to go ahead and change that. you know. So
Yeah. Everybody, but that's the thing is so many people are just so focused on their day to day shit that they don't even, so there's probably people right now that don't even realize that's what's happening.
well, and that's what I'm saying. That's where again that comes back down to doing that work on yourself, slowing down enough to really go within. Because when you do, for me personally, I can say it gave me a whole different perspective on this life and what we're really here for. And it took me away from looking at that typical day to day bullshit that I always tell people. I'm like, there's so many people going to jobs and doing things that they can't stand just because they're working the system that someone told them that we're supposed to be doing. And I'm like, that's not why we're here. I always tell people, fucking, we didn't come here just to go get a job, make money, pay bills, and die. I'm like, we're here for so much more. You know, that's where people have to start changing that mentality.
Yeah.
Start going within, doing the work. You'll start to see, oh, wait a minute. I am here for a whole lot more than that. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not an easy thing, but it's
No,
worth it.
no, yeah, it's definitely not easy, but and it's continuous. But like I said, yeah, it's well worth it when you start to see things like just differently. It's like I said, just how everything shifted for me and the way I look at things, the way I look at life and everyone, and why I'm here. Like that's why I'm always open to going deeper and doing things that are more in alignment with what I believe I'm here for. You know what I'm saying?
And
Not going nonsense. So
that's important because there's not very many people who can do that, you know.
yeah,
But
I think we all can. It's just are you willing to? And it's going to get uncomfortable. A lot of times when you're going, I think it's just like it's biblical, right? I mean, like they say, like the way through the gate is very narrow. Well, it's because honestly, it's like when you start to follow that path, that deep path within you, um, because the world says different things, you're gonna have that pushback. But it's well worth accepting that pushback and moving forward to what you're actually here for.
yeah, and so other than meditation, is there any techniques that you can share that people can start to do like maybe daily to help work through the shadow portion of themselves?
Something that helped me a lot was journaling, kind of getting things out and onto paper. So a lot of times what I would do or still do sometimes is I'll meditate daily, but meditate. And then after I meditate, a lot of times I'll go to journal. So if things came up, I'll write them down. Right. And I remember before I would leave the journal next to my bed and I would always, not always, but if I like woke up with some kind of, revelation and something about me, I would write it down because then you can go back and really pay attention to like, oh, like I didn't realize these things were things I'm struggling with. You know what I'm saying? So journaling definitely helped me. And then, like I said, of course, prayer and meditation, but like taking other people's perspectives. That's why, like I say, Wayne Dyer was one of my biggest, if not my biggest spiritual mentor and his work still, resonates with me. I still re-listen to his talks and read his books on a regular basis, just because when you start to look at those other perspectives other than what you've been taught, a lot of times it helps you start to go a whole lot deeper. You know what I'm saying? Because like he definitely thought outside the box, and that's what allowed me to really start growing and deeper and saying, okay, I don't have to. The stuff I was handed, like yeah, some of it was beneficial, but some of it was just keeping a ceiling on me, and I want to go beyond that, right? So that's why, like again, he said, have a mind open to everything and attached to nothing. I truly try to live by that because you can learn from so many different sources and things. So
Well, that's a very good point because they say knowledge is power, but knowledge doesn't just come from books. It doesn't just come from outside resources either. It comes from within also. Because, like I said, I think we all have. I think every person has an innate inner knowing of
mhm.
what's right, what's wrong. So, like when you're in a situation, or if you see something on the news, and you're like, that doesn't seem right. That's like you said, that's your intuition,
Mhm.
and like we've talked about this a million times, but like during COVID, I was like, nope, fuck you, you know.
And I'm the same way. That's what I said. Like, I saw straight through that shit and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do it, you know? And nothing against the people that wanted to follow and it felt like that was the right thing for them. Cool, go for it. But to me, I saw all the nonsense and I saw like the negative ramifications coming from that stuff. And that's where, again, you have to use discernment and follow your intuition, follow your heart, even if everybody else around you is telling you, oh, you're the problem, whatever. I mean, I tell people, listen to your heart because people are going to judge, they're going to point, that's what they want. They want people to be segregated and apart. And I was like, we all got to start looking at each other and loving each other for our own choices and saying, okay, it's your right. You choose what you want to do and still love each other unconditionally through that stuff.
I agree.
You know what
I agree. Because it's, there's been a lot of talk about, New World Order and all this other stuff. It's all just like everything, even though it's happening right now, there's people who say the United States is the last free country on earth. And if you look, I mean, I'm not gonna say it is, but that's like it looks like that's the majority of truth. Like
Mhm.
it's almost like because when you think about the idea of the United States, like we're not perfect, obviously, we haven't been perfect, but this is a place where you can express your opinions, express your ideas freely, or at least it used to be. Now you get fucking
Now you get
crucified.
censored.
Yeah, now
Yep.
you get censored. Uh, but that's a beautiful thing, and I think you know a lot of people don't understand the weight of that, and a lot of people don't understand the value of it
Hmm.
because in my experience, people, especially like people who are born here, it's just like a part of our life. So we're just like, oh, this is just normal, whatever. And
Hmm.
then, but then you meet someone from another country, and they're like, fucking USA. Why? Because they come from a place where maybe they were oppressed or they didn't have the same rights that we have here.
Yeah.
But then you look at the big picture and you see all this bullshit in the news, and you're like, oh, they're trying to basically forego the Constitution, forego the Bill of Rights, and be like, yeah, maybe you don't need this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like,
Yeah.
how crazy, like this dude. So there was this guy, his son, I think his son was, I believe, if I remember correctly, his son was killed in the withdrawal of Afghanistan.
Mm.
And I think, I'm gonna have to look it up, but I think it was in Congress or something. And he stood up and he started chanting United States Marine Corps, right? And I'm looking through the comments because it was like a video, and I'm like, and initially I'm like, man, that's fucked up. And then I was looking at the comments and people were like saying, well, that's a law. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, how the fuck is that a law? Doesn't that go against the Constitution? First Amendment? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
So there's
Absolutely.
already certain laws in certain circumstances where it's like, oh, you can't say this, you can't do this, blah blah blah. And it's like that's how it happens, though.
Hmm.
That's how liberty gets lost because they'll put it in one little segment of something, but you give them an inch, it'll take a fucking mile. So then that's the game plan for what I believe is, you know, just trying to remove that from our culture.
Oh yeah. Little by little over the years, they've been trying to do that, right? And then the people that come in to actually try to make a difference tend to be the ones that end up executed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind
Yeah.
of funny.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you're trying to maintain or change something that's positive? Nah, we need control.
Yeah. Exactly.
Deuces.
Exactly. That's what
Which
I'm
is,
saying. Obvious.
yeah. But like yeah, like even right now, it's so like they're not even trying to hide it anymore. It's just everything's in our face.
Hmm.
So like one thing I've seen go around a lot is like shit's not this shit isn't anything new. It's just they don't care anymore.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I believe that's true. It's like how much shit has been hidden from the main population, not even just in the United States, worldwide.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
like how much like that's the thing with COVID and like social media is like social media can kind of almost forego rights because it's its own private entity.
Hmm.
So like, oh, we censored this post because it promotes hate speech. But then like Jordan Peterson became famous for because he resisted in Canada. They were trying to pass a law where you would get fined or jailed if you didn't refer to someone by their proper pronouns.
Mm.
And he's like, And they're like, "Why are you protesting this?" He's like, I'm not protesting the use of these words. I'm protesting the concept of compelled speech." And he was right, because once you start controlling what people can say, what does that do? That controls what information is out there, and then now anyone can make up whatever truth that they want.
Absolutely. Yep.
So it's like, bro, come on. Like, if you, like I said, it like just like watching a movie. If you pay attention, you can see through the bullshit.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep. And that's why I say it's more and more apparent every day with all our, lovely government and the stupid shit they do, as you can see straight through what they're doing.
Yeah, it's just,
But I do believe it's all changing for the good, even though I can tell people they may not see it. I'm like, I still believe that.
well, yeah, because I think at the end of the day, like, for lack of a better term, justice will be served.
Yeah.
Like, people will, like, no matter how much evil is in the world, good always prevails.
Always.
Even if it doesn't seem like it, maybe shit's going crazy, maybe there's a war, I don't know, but in the end, evil, because I think we talked about this before, evil can't create, it just destroys.
Mhm.
But what happens once that runs out of fuel? Or what
Exactly.
happens if you meet a resistance? And I'm not even talking about like warfare, I'm just talking about whatever you're trying to do. If people don't, like you said, if people don't accept it or stop accepting it, then there's no power. Like, right? Because where you give energy is where you give power.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Yeah. I tell people only give focus and energy to what you want, not what you don't want.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, buddy.
But
Well, doing you have anything you want to say to like wrap it up, or
um
anything you want to add?
I would just give advice to people, just take your life one day at a time. Don't get so wrapped up in the day-to-day bullshit, and try to live in the moment. Because once, like Brian said, once you start to slow down and try to really assess things for what they are, then it kind of gives you the space to be able to think and to acknowledge the truth about things instead of just reacting to things.
Absolutely.
And then with shadow work, just like we talked about in the last episode, you know, I'm not saying you have to sit in a dark room, literally. Might help, but there's other ways you can navigate through your own shit. That could be listening to music, or like Brian said, journaling is a very strong one, because it allows you to take, even if they're intrusive type of thoughts, what writing does is it gets it out,
Yes.
right? It's just like when we're talking about it's okay for men to cry, right? Like, that's healing. So
Yep.
journaling is another form, not only of like documenting, some people do it to like document their dreams or whatever, but it's also a healthy way to release it from yourself so that it's no longer like weighing on you. So
Yeah. Absolutely. No, great advice. Yep, like Nate said, I think the only thing I can add to that is definitely just be present. Try to live in the present moment. I know it seems hard because the mind wants to wander, but that's another reason why meditation helps so much, is because it allows you to quiet that monkey mind so that you can actually see the truth and you can feel and hear the truth, and then you'll realize that this is the only moment you got, and you can make the best out of it. Happiness is a choice. So
yeah, like if you think about the concept of if there is no tomorrow,
yep,
then if the world ended tomorrow, what would you do today? Right? Would you be grateful for everything you have? Would you love the people that are closest to you? Or would you be crazy and fucking try to rob people and all this crazy shit, right?
no, seriously, that's another good point. That's something I say all the time. I always tell people when getting really wrapped up in little nonsense. I tell people, just think about if this was your last moment. Like, don't you want it to be a good one, right? And love people for who they are. Like, be that light. You know what I mean? If this was your last moment, because you don't know truly, right? And so why would you ever want to go out on a negative note? That's why I don't get why people want to argue and bitch and moan. And I'm like, well, we can all just be a team.
Yeah.
So,
Amen.
yes, sir.
But all right, guys, if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.
We'll see you next time.